Rick and Morty is a unique show to me. It's special being my personal case of a show that was once good, got bad, but I kept watching, though may have started showing glimmers of hope again. I figured I'd retrospect my entire experience with this very odd show. I have a lot of shared sentiments with other people, but also some deviations in opinion. I was there since the beginning, a ground zeroer, or at least enough to watch since season 1. I recall seeing some ads for the show, and they looked kinda cool. They were self-aware, but in such a way that wasn't so wink-wink to the audience, and more oh god reality's crumbling around us. It was kinda cool. I recall my first episode in the show was M. Night Shyamalan's, which outside of being an M. Night Shyamalan reference, was a pretty cool and trippy episode. It was a kind of interesting jumping on point. It was an episode built around a twist on top of a twist, which made Rick seem smart to process. I also find it funny how, especially for a season 1 episode, it was one that particularly didn't feature a lot of the Smith family, with no Summer and barely any Beth. With only focus being Rick, Morty's a high-functioning simulation, and oblivious Jerry. All interesting with how stuff pans out later on. There's also a scene of Rick and Morty in the shower, which is played off as to fool aliens, but is more uncomfortable in hindsight with how the series proceeds. Anyway, I liked the episode, and proceeded to watch the episodes before, as well as every subsequent episode leading up to now. There's a lot of little touches I like within the episodes. The pilot's interesting for playing up the dementia aspect with Rick, which isn't played up as much later on. I like the subtle connecting through line from episode 1 to episode 2, where the last episode ended with promises to improve Morty's grade, and next episode following up on that with brain inception. Continuity nods are always a question throughout the series, but it's a nice touch here. The end of the virus episode was just crazy and balls, and major respect for the show's creators going there. I didn't care much for the interdimensional cable episode with its skits. It didn't really seem that funny or creative, though hot take for me. The Citadel of Rick's episode was fun. There's a lot of little touches earlier on that resonated with younger me that don't fly as much now. Like, I used to be an atheist, so I used to identify more with Rick on that. But as a believer, we sort of diverge now.
There is no God, Summer. Gotta rip that band-aid off now, you'll thank me later. Okay.
Later on, they establish other Greek gods and even an afterlife, so I don't know if Rick's world even really supports him. I used to find Rick's love spiel about it just being a chemical reaction relatable. Now I find it a little more cringy. Heck, there are even things like I used to be a hater of the movie Titanic, like it being an overrated movie or whatever, so I used to take more glee in them making fun of the movie. Now I'm just kinda mad on it. I don't focus as much on movies being overrated. I'll admit with early Rick and Morty, there's a certain comfortability to the show. Like, it can make all these dark jokes and nihilistic proverbs, but there's a certain easiness to the episodes. Part of it might be the line skirted, like it just didn't go as far as later Rick and Morty. More often now I just get a weird, uncomfortable feeling. I've always been a very strong optimist, and even while the show is constantly preaching nihilism, I felt like there was a possible optimistic outlook to have of the show. Like with the creative possibilities it's shown, it made the world seem limitless. While there's a lot of static family sitcoms, this show sort of stood out. Anyway, that's my takeaway starting with season 1. Now going on to season 2, new dimensions are added. I like how the first episode was a direct follow-up to the consequences of the season 1 finale. Like sure, why not show some consequences? And that bit of a Roy simulation. Good stuff. In some sense, this season might have stronger aspects to season 1, but the worst aspects are notably worse. I recall I had a debate in season 1 of which was my favorite episode, between episodes 4, 5, and 6. But during season 2, I had an easy winner with the 6th episode, The Ricks Must Be Crazy. It was just a really creative idea, solid structure, cool foil for Rick, and had an ending that tied everything together. Also, this was 2015, me saying it was my favorite. Now it's not so much. Probably not even my favorite this season at this point. I just don't really resonate with this kind of story as much anymore. Summer stuff drags on a bit. I think Gate Swifty's a fun one for me. I'll state an aspect that got worse this season is the family drama. This is ironically something specific to before season 3 Rick and Morty, which is having Beth and Jerry constantly argue, which ironically later Rick and Morty have been good not to have with development. Season 1 was at least more subdued in the background, but in season 2 they really crammed it up. Like in episode 3, with them just arguing about what to do with this alien, or the therapy episode. At the time I had my least favorite episode be Tiny Rick. A lot of people said Interdimensional 2 was their weakest one, which I think I at least like the skits more in the sequel. But overall it's hard to have an opinion on improv comedy. But as far as the Tiny Rick episode, not gonna lie, I was disappointed they brushed over fighting vampires. But in hindsight, Rick and Morty does this a lot. I just found the Tiny Rick plot to be kinda lame and annoying. Like, I get it, you want to be younger and being old sucks. At least now I vibe more with nuances. Also knowing how much lower this show could get. They also had a really extensive Beth and Jerry plot, and I was just so through with them. You know, I had a lot of ideas regarding the supporting cast. I found a lot of characters like Mr. Goldenfold to be kind of endearing, and seeing them so little makes me curious about fleshing out possible stories they could have. Now, going on to the finale, we get some interesting stuff with a wedding gone awry and the family on the run, with Rick eventually turning himself in. This was a damn enticing way to end the season, and really left me wanting more. I will say in hindsight that this was a really cheap way to end the season, and with a break between season 2 and 3, it seemed kinda dirty. Now, before getting on for later season, I figured I'd focus on some in-between stuff. In 2016, I started consistently uploading review content for YouTube, and one of the videos I'd done was on Rick and Morty. My attempts to make videos around Rick and Morty are interesting, tracking the progression of a show. It's surreal having me unabashedly like the show, remarking so positively and such. Since the video needed a hook, I decided to talk about the idea of a Morty revolution, since the Mortys are like an oppressed class for Ricks, and maybe there could be an uprising. It wasn't something I quite believed to the extent, but it was fun to think of. I did predict Rick's artificially setting up Beth's and Jerry's to get together. There's a part I referenced Game of Thrones with the phrase "winter's coming" with "Mortys are coming," and I found that cute. I also had a self-aware claymation comedy series where I referenced Rick and Morty more positively. One of the characters was literally called Metamaster. It was a long wait for season 3 with speculation amok, and with the premiere happening on April Fool's Day, I couldn't have been happier. We had an epic return which featured aspects of Rick's backstory, the Citadel, Cronenberg world, collapsing the galactic government, and Beth and Jerry splitting up. What a return. I still like it in hindsight. It's funny how they said the backstory was totally made up, and later was retconned to be real, or partially real. I guess Rick could just lie like that. Now going on for the rest of the series, well, this was when Rick and Morty became the most mainstream. And this is when the writing also started to get experimental. A lot to consider in hindsight. Lots of misconceptions, so let's dig in. Then I used to be more of a Rick and Morty fan compared to now where I'm more passively Rick and Morty fan. But I think some of the stuff still stands. Like, I think a lot of the criticism was unfair. And honestly, a fair bit of misconceptions, like with the high IQ Rick and Morty fans. I personally never encountered them compared to other fandoms with elitism, like Snyder fans, but I do believe they exist to an extent, somewhere on Reddit. Like, I could see the mindset leading to elitism. There was a copy pasta that was funny and clearly a parody. Like, critics using it are just playing with a misconception. There's a joke about secretly having a Rick and Morty tattoo. How are you supposed to take this seriously? There are a lot of other fandoms where people act like you have to have a certain intelligence level to understand it, like BoJack Horseman or Breaking Bad. Rick and Morty really isn't that special on that front, other than having a super scientist character to accompany it. Also regarding the Szechuan sauce debacle, there was a high demand for it, which caused stress. However, there's this one viral clip used where this person is a troll, and apparently hasn't even watched the show. So much like the copy pasta, it was kind of unfair to use that. I'll be critical where I could be. I'm just saying some of these points were kind of lame. Getting into the show, there are some notable structural shakeups, which caused people to pause. People talk of the season being serialized when I wouldn't exactly say so. Outside of the first 2 episodes and the last 2 episodes, there isn't any order you need to watch the episodes in between. And the connectivity sometimes is loose, as like the first 2 episodes in season 1. Really, it's more of a status quo shakeup than it ever getting serialized. There's talk of people using God language to describe Rick, and him generally being more OP. For the most part, I don't mind. I feel like power scaling Rick to an absurd degree could be part of the entertainment value. Also, generally it's other characters around Rick, or Rick notably being out of character, where the God thing comes up, over Rick self-proclaiming himself. I do agree it might help to have some more grounded stakes, but a bit case by case. I like when Rick's OP-ness gets challenged, like the traumatization Rick laxation, or when he says in the premiere episode he'll never do an adventure with Jerry, when he eventually does one a few episodes later, showing that Rick is susceptible to things not going his way. A lot of things in the show are actually due to things not working out for Rick. Like, he acts like something's totally foolproof about everything, then 1 or 2 things throw things off, like the whole Clone Beth situation. Getting into misconceptions, let's zone into the Pickle Rick episode. This is often focused in for some reason. I think it's far from the show's most stellar joke, but I guess it's pretty impressive he turned himself into a pickle. Our Colt seeing an animatic for the fight scene and just being at pause whether it was part of the show. He says, "I know this is your world, not mine." It's such a vague line. Then seeing in context, it's actually pretty cool. Like, I don't care what people think of the therapy plotline, but Rick being a pickle who has to make outfits out of cockroaches and rats to survive is dumb, outrageous fun. Now, as far as the therapy plotline, I mean, I thought it provided decent insight into the Smith family. Some people might argue it's a bit on the nose, but I think it worked within the episode.
Never ever send your main character to therapy.
My main takeaway, if anything, is what about Morty and Summer? They were shown to have major issues, yet they got ignored for more Rick psychoanalysis. Like, I think that's part of the point. Some people could have legitimate issues, but someone else's gets more to the forefront just because it's more enticing. Could make us all introspect a little more, you know?
I liked her.
So, what are you thinking, like Smokey's Tavern? Maybe Shoney's?
Yeah, either one.
Going into other episodes, the Vindicators episode's a bit fun, but also a bit lame just to have them all be jerks and die to end. The Tales of a Citadel is a fun concept, but I can't help but think how easy it is to write a bunch of Ricks and Mortys with social commentary. It might have helped if more of these guys were recurring rather than one-off, other than Evil Morty. Like, what's Police Rick doing? Or just Stand By Me Mortys. Also, while Evil Morty works for a reveal, it does call into question how a Morty could just become president like that. I don't really buy the rise up. I remember I at least liked Morty's mind blowers more than Interdimensional Cable, though there just wasn't much justification for Rick to do this. Like, the way he explained it, it seems like he's just doing it for the audience, which is just kinda weird. Going on to the final 2 episodes, the idea of Fruitland's an interesting idea, but they don't really end up doing much for it overall. And the finale itself, I like more in hindsight, since the President ended up being the most recurring character in the show for some reason. Though it is a bit of a jump going from the last episode, where he totally liked Rick and Morty, to suddenly having this antagonistic rivalry. Overall, while there's a bit to like this season, Rick and Morty is starting to lose the comfortability that it had with the past 2 seasons. Something that'll be more apparent as the show goes on. Funny enough, when this season came out, I watched these episodes in a college dorm room on a TV, so outside of whatever chatter was going on online, it was fun to have more localized conversations, compared to how I more recently watched Rick and Morty. During Season 3's popularity, there was this channel that made upbeat auto-tunes of random lines from the show. Like, it's funny taking a line like, "You know nothing matters, but the universe is yours," a catchy bop.
When you know nothing matters, the universe is yours. When you know nothing matters, the universe is yours.
Overall, I had a slew of thoughts regarding this season, and I didn't know how to approach a video on the show that I once really liked. So I did the one thing I thought I could do. Rick vs. Zeus animation. A lot of this was brought upon the President having a throwaway line that Poseidon was in Area 51, and I thought it would be funny to introduce Zeus and make him fight Rick. It was a fun concept, and I was attempting new animation trick. This would be long before I ended up having an iPad, where I could pull off much better 2D animation. It was fun showing the various ways they could combat each other. It started with Rick dying, then using all of his contingencies leading up to Season 3 to bring himself back. I also had fun integrating some of the show's sound effects. It's also funny this was well before Season 4, where Rick met Hephaestus and ended up fighting a version of Zeus on his own. It's possible we just thought of the same idea at the same time, but it was cool nonetheless. My video was unlisted at the time, so didn't really capitalize the connection as much as I could have. I mean, it was the pandemic, man, but yeah, I did a Rick vs. Zeus animation well before the show did it.
Whoa, what?
Now is the time for the battle, for who will be the one king of the gods of this universe.
When you know nothing matters, the universe is yours.
With an attitude like that, you will never win.
Now going on to Season 4, I was entering a new mindset ready to embrace the season. There wasn't as much of a hate-dom. We were past the shake-up, so we could embrace new possibilities. It's interesting seeing this between Season 3 and Season 5. It isn't the shake-up Season 3 was, and it wasn't the fallen depths of Season 5. It's just somewhere in the middle, with a few noteworthy episodes. I actually did a trailer analysis this season. I had some bad audio around the time, which I put a literal disclaimer for in the intro. I tried doing some theory making of what some of the stuff means, got quite a few things wrong. I actually did a review of the first episode because of a good mood it put me in. It was a fun episode. It was also one that diminished a lot of the show's stakes, being able to be reincarnated in different dimensions. But we can assume it's case by case wherever he has contingencies. The season had a lot of ups and downs. The Heistron episode was their attempt of having a twist on top of a twist, but fell drawn out by the end. The Dragon episode was gross. Also missed the opportunity to have Rick be challenged by the world of magic. The Anthology train is one where things get challenged since it's nothing but concentrated meta writing. But towards the end, with them exhausting the show's potential, shows them really seething with the many ideas they have. Did like this Rick using Christianity at the end though. People use the episode to act like they don't like serialization, and that they're suddenly hypocrites for when they suddenly do that writing again.
I thought Rick and Morty hated serialized stories.
Like, it's clear they just thought it'd be a fun premise. Oh, and while it doesn't get as bad as season 5 and 6, the season started to lean into incest jokes, like the Slut Dragon Soul Orgy, Rick getting uncomfortably close to kissing Morty in the train episode, or Rick and Morty actually kissing with the sterile aliens. I look back at season 1 jokes where they're like, oh, incest is gross, oh my gosh. Weird, totally not gross for liking incest. But later on, how they fell into incest jokes, it's like, yeah, you buggers are just lying to yourselves. The Vat of Acid episode is considered a highlight for the season. It certainly has entertaining moments, though it also is Rick at his cruelest. Going on the Zeus episode, I was bound to have feelings for it since I had an animation before the season. Honestly, something that strikes out to me is its overall the kind of premise that would be interesting to see played out more than a 20-minute runtime. Like, Rick and crew is building a whole ass civilization. I'd like to see that for more than the limited time frame, but it's fine for the episode. Now getting to the finale episode, I'm starting to notice a pattern with serialized episodes, that they often bring various serialized plot points together as a way of extra cleaning. From the Citadel and Galactic Federation season 3 premiere, the Phoenix Person and Beth's Year, and later on of cases like Evil Morty and Rick Prime. The crossover had a lot of the makings of something good, but slight hiccups. For starters, the meta-ness is cranked up a bit, from Morty and Summer originally being combative with an invisibility belt, then later explaining that they went on an arc to get along. I'd be more fine with this for a standalone episode, but it's kind of distracting for this kind of episode. Also, Jerry randomly being a ventriloquist, because this is really out of nowhere. Like, even if Jerry would do this, it would help to have some setup for it, especially since this was kind of pivotal for resolving conflict. Now, as far as some good, I like Rick versus Phoenix Person, with how off the walls it is. It helps that while Rick has a lot of meta self-work talk, PP is just very straightforward do. This episode also leaves some inquiry for what it means for the two Beths now. Like, Rick just sort of did this thing and it can't really be undone. He's just stuck with two versions of his daughter, not even knowing which is which. You wanted to play God with the multiverse, now you got two daughters. Deal with it. Overall meh experience, and much more to come in season 5, where the show debatably hit rock bottom. There's a lot to dig into. The premiere episode had a lot of promise, but a lot of iffy undertones. Mr. Nimbus seemed like an interesting foil to Rick, but thinking of Dan Hartman playing sex pest Mr. Nimbus just gives me an uncomfortable feeling. I was enticed by him. The Narnia-esque dimension's pretty neat, but it felt obvious it was going to go south. If nothing else, it was cool to have Jessica affected by the time dimension, and since then, hasn't really come back as Morty's easy girlfriend. The episode where the Smiths constantly died might have been the first episode to really piss me off. I tolerate it more in Revisit, but I just don't like having these decoys of the Smith family constantly dying. The Planetina episode's cute on paper, but it's uncomfortable knowing that Morty's underage and constantly acknowledging it. Also, Rick's side plot was really lame. And as far as the Sperm episode, I'm gonna vaguely defend it. It's often touted as among Rick and Morty's worst, but I don't mind it as much. When I first saw the season, I at least considered this to be the upper half of episodes. Like at least above 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 10. So my ranking might change. So as far as defense I got, I just thought it was obvious that Rick and Morty are out of character on purpose. Like, okay, Rick and Morty are crazy dimension hopping characters, so it's hard to get a grasp of what their existence is really like. I'm used to a lot of cases where they're seemingly out of character, like having Morty repeatedly tell Rick not to test sperm, and suddenly have a hang up on lying seemed like a pretty obvious cue. They were meant to be playing fast and loose. Even the forced sexism where Summer and Beth are obviously put down It just seemed like a silly way to poke fun at the archetypes. And hey, it was fun for Jerry to serve water. I could see a more casual viewer accepting this more as the status quo, but as someone who's watched shows, I bought it. I see various cartoon reviewers like Cartoonchi and Mr. Enter rag on this episode, and it's like, okay.
The sperm episode again. Do I need to state how much I hate the sperm episode again?
If this is the one you guys want to be enraged by. The very ending with Morty revealing it's his sperm and the enlarged egg of Summer creates this dramatic irony that, oh yeah, that egg's gonna get fertilized, and there's nothing that you could do to stop it. It's kind of like dramatic irony knowing a secret that the characters don't know. It just fills you with dread. There's plenty of episodes I honestly write off because they gross out, like the Quado episode, the Suicide Spaghetti, but here it's like it's just microscopic sperm zoomed in. That's more cool than anything else, which happen to have cartoonish teeth and eyes. I also see this as part of Morty's confused horniness arc. He had an attempt with Jessica in the first episode. That didn't work out. His devastation with Planetine in the third. And his following episode is just him overcoming that. Now, there is a lot wrong with this episode. Most of what I like is just through irony. And it just so happens to be irony that I gelled with more rather than repelled like other cases. Chud's subplot in particular got tedious. If I was more critical, I'd be down this episode more, but I like it fine the way it is. Anyway, that's my piece. In the episode where people like pain, they look gross and they're laying on a low fic that they like pain. Yeah, I get it. And there's the episode where Rick and Morty turn into a turkey. It was funny for a bit, but it was drawn out making a whole episode. Oh, there's the episode with the Go-Go Ferrets. This episode brings back the incest baby. I must admit, for a show that acts like they don't care about continuity, it's weird that they bring back something within a few episodes. It's the incest baby. Now we get to the finale of the season, where we go back to evil Morty and the Citadel, which might have the most annoying meta-layered dialogue out of any of the canon episodes, like at least with the Phoenix Person 1. When we got to PP, the character wasn't playing along, and it made the dynamic more interesting. Here, Evil Morty's dialogue is just caked with meta-talking, just as much as Rick's is. I don't feel any menace, just meta-jab, meta-jab. Overall, Season 5 was a slog. It was kind of a moment where I considered this show's kind of bad now, with most of these episodes disappointing, which sucks because I once praised this show, but maybe it's just part of a growing process for me. Also, leading up to Season 5, the show got worse with each subsequent season, which is outstanding and not a good trend. Then is when we also got a few big retrospects for the show, with Just Stop and Cartoonchi covering up until Season 5. Granted, Cartoonchi did cover later seasons of a show with just shorter videos. Also, less jarring editing. His main video has some interesting editing choices. Content warning, fast pacing.
Scene transition. Now, I'm struggling to find a cohesive way of phrasing this, so I don't know what happened. Was it a sudden change in cognition? Has creativity being exchanged for creativity? I was born to cope! It's around my steadily declining mental stability.
Kermit's suicide.
If I take my show and drive it off of a cliff, I can subtly tell my audience that I was simply trolling them the entire time. The equivalent of a YouTuber criticizing something for doing the big cringe and then turning back to the audience and going, "Now I know I do this as well." Elon Musk and his consequences have been disastrous for the human race. Wait, that's not it. Let me fetch it. Remember, here's the sperm episode again. Do I need to state how much I hate the sperm episode again? Holy shit. What happened? Itty. What the hell is Dogecoin? Oh no.
Maybe he's going through some stuff. Just Stop's video was more measured and discussing more issues he noticed. I'd push back against things like Rick being OP as an issue, but to each their own. Anyway, going on to Season 6. Actually, before that season came out, we got a series of shorts which explored the Vindicators, before dying in their Season 3 episode. It makes them seem even more incompetent, which clashes with their semi-competence in the Rick and Morty episode. And it probably has some of the most jarring continuity errors, like how Dunamitron was portrayed. I did a video on this because no one was paying attention to this. Anyway, on Season 6. At this point, I wasn't pulling any punches. Season 5 was the low point. Even while the season was a bit better, I'd still dunk on the mid and not hold back on issues. I liked the premiere more than Season 5's finale. Returning for original timelines was an interesting idea. The concept for Rick's timeline's haunting, thinking how Rick froze everyone in place. It has haunting implications for what Rick has done to the current set of characters. Like, there could be a meta in-universe reason why no one seems to grow up. 2 episodes later, we will get to that episode. Morty remarks, how many Thanksgivings have we even had, despite only being 14 years old. I also like the concept of Morty returning to Cronenberg world and meeting his original Jerry. The dialogue for Morty's a little iffy, but the Jerry stuff goes hard. I don't really care for the Beths arguing this episode. Also Rick Prime. This seems like a weird villainous force to focus on. Like, after several seasons building up to evil Morty, we're just supposed to vibe with this Rick Prime fella. I just don't really get anything from him. Though we do see how that gets subverted later. Anyway, the next episode is the return of a Roy simulator, which seems like a decent concept, except everyone sounds like Morty. Like, kind of defeats the immersion. This isn't Rick Lantis mix-up. We don't need this. Also, that Die Hard joke got stale. Sorry, I just saw this giant cockroach anyway. Now on to the incest of this season. We certainly had a lot of incestuousness in the previous seasons, but now we have our own incest couple. Well, not exactly incest. It's between Beth and her clone. I mean, a big part of the taboo with incest is sticking with what's familiar, rather than going out and meeting new people, and you don't get more familiar than your own clone.
Would I fuck myself? Yes, 100% for sure. If I had a cloning machine, I wouldn't need a boyfriend. I would have lots of fun.
Like, these two theoretically should have the same memories from birth up until ABC's of Beth. What's the differential other than we went on different paths at a certain point, which wasn't even on our control, it was just a coin flip. We also get the reveal at the end that the wine from Rick influenced their choice making, so it's Rick's fault his daughters banged each other. Great job. Later on, we get the fortune cookie episode, which happens to involve a twisted fortune for Jerry sleeping with his mom. Like, there's ultimately a greater story with destiny, and they probably just wanted an edgy fortune for Jerry. I mean, later on we get an episode with a piss fetish, probably the most harmless of fetishes, and it happens to be my favorite episode this season. Honestly, with the Jerry's mom thing, I wonder about touching on the fact the family abandoned Earth back in the premiere, so Jerry's original mom got frundles. Why wasn't there a throwaway line about that? Anyway. We get an episode involving intelligent dinosaurs, which is cool exploring more intelligent beings than Rick. Otherwise, a mostly boring episode. I think the meta episode this season is better than season 4 showing. It wasn't just milking the show of its potential. It did more exploring of meta concepts like the self-referential Six or Joseph Campbell. Though previously on, getting away with everything does annoy me. And shows how the show has special treatment for Justin Roiland voice characters. I just can't stand Justin Roiland voice characters at this point. I knew the Hunt Me guy was going to come back in the Killing Everything episode because it was voiced by Justin Roiland. I'll touch more on this dude later. So anyway, the Piss episode is easily the best episode this season, for actually delving into the character of Rick, Jerry being a badass, and even seeing Rick come to terms with therapy. Even if Rick having D-list villains comes out of nowhere, like a lot of other things in this show. Sun episode was lame, the lightsaber finale was lame, and this season's a step up from season 5 at least, and certain elements hold up on hindsight, with the weakest part being the incest. While better than season 5, at this point I was pretty beaten down by Rick and Morty. I was gonna do a roast of this season, but I couldn't even bother. Then Justin Roiland got controversial, and then booted from the show, so a bit of talk of that. Now it's always tricky talking about controversial actors and what it says in hindsight for the show. I think from a lot of what I've seen, it doesn't look good for Justin, and recasting was just the ethical thing to do. It's kind of interesting looking at the creative duo of Justin Roiland and Dan Hartman. Like, it was propped up as the perfect storm of, Justin's the wacky one, and Dan's the structural one. But it doesn't quite fit into those archetypes. Like, with Justin eventually slacking and Dan having his silly moments, it seems a little more gray. I just recall Bird Person being one of the few moments in the finale of season 4 where the meta stuff was toned down. Outside the controversy, I think that there is just a general fun of seeing other actors attempt the voices. It's like Batman and Joker have their iconic Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill voices, right? But it's fun to see other people have their takes on the voices. The new voices could sound close to the original, but there could also be enough of deviation to make it its own thing. With Rick and Morty, they basically tried to do the same kind of voices as before. Solar Opposites did something completely different with the British voice. This is also the first time I mentioned Solar Opposites in this video. From what I've seen, it's fine. It just didn't hook me like Rick and Morty. Like, I saw season 1 and I didn't really stick around more beyond that. I'll also take this time to mention the Rick and Morty anime. I haven't really watched past episode 3. I've seen some clips later on, and there's some interesting stuff with the time relative character. So it could be interesting stuff. The animation is a little jarring. Anyway, getting on for new season. The first episode involves Mr. Poopy Butthole getting his poop back. And it's so funny, after so many episodes propping up Justin Roiland OCs, the newest episode centering on the biggest Justin Roiland OC, with all these guest appearances, doesn't even have Roiland. Classic. Nice. I heard a lot of people harp on this episode, partly since this is the first episode of a new voice. I think it's fine. Nothing grand, but passable. Generally with this season, it has some of the show's lowest moments, but the highs are so high, they kinda make this season stand out, which is weird. And lots of in between, of course. The Rick and Jerry episodes have been getting weirder and weirder, and it's a fun idea to have a botched Freaky Friday where neither Jerry or Rick are exactly each other, which is fun to think of. Joe Ricky's gross, but that's part of the point. The Suicide Spaghetti episode's a weird one for me. Like, a lot of people think this is one of the better episodes of this season. Swap this out for the Numbers episode for me. I really didn't care for this one. It feels like one of the most substandard Rick teaches a morality lesson on social commentary to one-up Morty. I just get so tired of these. And the subject matter is really unpleasant. And it's really weird for Rick to serve up human organs as the world's best spaghetti in the back. I really do like the Live Forever song though. I listened to that song on its own, and it's a pretty good song. Getting into the continuity episode of this season, it's a really strong one. Probably the best continuity episode they ever done. Like, there's basically no meta humor, just these sets of characters doing their business. They ended up selling me on Rick Prime. Before, I just really didn't vibe with him, and at least here he has a direct effect on characters. And killing him off like that was a really striking move. Also, I like Evil Morty here. He's been a weird character, but at this point I vibe with him being a chaotic neutral who happens to be helping this time around. And the ending, man. Taking that empty feeling from the end of the virus episode in season 1 and flipping it to Rick was genius. Overall, a really solid episode. And setting it halfway through the season really ties into the show's themes, that this could just sort of happen in the middle of the season. But also, a lot of the callbacks don't strike as hard. The next episode ended up being an anthology episode, which had some good moments, and a better setup than Morty's Mind Blowers, just not the hook of the last episode. Also, aspects are touched in the Quato episode, which might be the worst episode of this season. Just another gross out episode with a drawn out joke. Okay, so to touch on the rise of the Numeritrons. Now, when this first came out, I didn't even watch it fully. I just saw what the joke was, thought it was a humorous troll, then I didn't even bother watching it till later on when I was actually in the mood. And honestly, this might be my third favorite episode of this season. It's just a dumb space adventure which involves the very simple concept of letters and numbers. It's kind of fun how it builds up the characters fighting infinity. I also like this in Mr. Goldenfold episode, a character that I've wanted to have focus on since the early days of the show. This wasn't the most ideal framework for focus, but honestly I'll take what I could get. Honestly, most people who hate on this episode need to chill out. At least the sperm episode involved the main crew being out of character. This is just a side adventure which you can take it or leave it. I said I didn't even watch this episode till later on when I was actually ready, so maybe some people give this another chance. Anyway. The next episode confirmed heaven, and I LOL'd. I mean, it's not the perfect episode, but it feels right for Rick to literally be shown the prospect of a Christian heaven, but then throwing away because his consciousness is too atheistic. Then just make this into milking the afterlife's internal energy in Valhalla. Smartest man in the universe, sure. Also Pokeball. Then the finale being the Fearhole episode. This isn't the continuity episode of episode 5, but still provides something powerful. This might be the strongest episode based around a twist on top of twists. I think back to M. Night Shyamalan's, which is a fun version of that concept, but it doesn't really offer much other than how many twisted layers they have and how smart it makes Rick seem. Here, we reveal something integral about Morty, which makes sense for Rick, which is why would he jump to a hole? It's Morty's own path after all. I like the way it faced introspection with this version of Rick, seeming to face this version of Diane. We're left with various levels of conflict. Rick is acting all meta, catching on how they're probably still in the hole, and Diane's just acting horrified, not knowing what's going on. And with the whole other question of what's real, maybe you could just accept the fantasy. It may feel like a bit of a cop-out, Rick was never in the hole, but maybe it calls into question what Rick would see if he went in for hole, or if he would ever leave, consumed by fear. Anyway, that was season 7 overall. I would say overall I liked it. Like, it had a fair bit of meh and gross out episodes, while having 2, or in my opinion 3, that were really good. But with those episodes being really exceptional, they really elevated the season. It's really arbitrary how people judge a season of a show by getting the average of episodes. Like, the show's ultimately episodic. So I just say the few good episodes did for me, much like how Pissmaster elevated season 6. Also, I must be honest, a big factor is getting the ick of Roiland out. Now realizing how repulsive he is, it just feels nice to get some fresh new voices to provide their own spin. Anyway, overall pro. Now getting into the latest current season, Season 8. 8 looks like infinity. Numericons taught me that. Last season we got the season without Roiland. Now we have one further from that point, and more creative choices devoid of that, so let's dig in. This season starts off with a banger, with a whole ass Matrix episode. It's kind of funny how chronologically this is right after the Fear Hole episode, and it kind of feels like a regression for Rick. I mean, he is a character capable of an array of things, so I'll not really hold this against him. It's interesting dealing with these radically different versions of Morty and Summer that inevitably had to get regressed back. Morty's PTSD flashbacks and trigger feel startlingly realistic. We get an episode focusing on Rick teaming up with Space Beth. It wasn't a totally noteworthy episode, but felt kinda nice having them team up. Rick's a little less jaded compared to that while in the past. They also did a Citadel focus episode, which they technically haven't done since season 3. This one might be a little more hard-hitting with how grimy everything is. And here we aren't even dealing with multiverse variants, rather clones of normal Ricks and Mortys, really calling into question self and identity. There's the horny Easter Bunny episode, which, that was a little lame. What do Easter Bunnies have to do with horniness? Rule of thumb, be skeptical of Rick and Morty episode 4s. You got the Vindicators episode, Slut Dragon, Sperm Monsters, Suicide Spaghetti, just be skeptical. Then we have the Cryo Awaken episode, which seemed like it would be an episode teaching Morty an unfair lesson, but ended up being more about Rick's lack of preparedness and the dumb hunt for hypercool. I LOL'd when Morty randomly beat up Rick. Now we have a Season Beth's episode, which after season 6 case, I had a lot of skepticism with how things were going to go down. Luckily, they just turned themselves into children and were more exploring how much of a mess of a character Beth is. Also, it's good having Rick come in. I honestly thought there was a chance Gene would die, and I got worried. I didn't care much for the side plot. Actually, a reoccurring pattern of Rick and Morty looking back. And then we have the Movielizer episode. From the title team, we get a surreal, interdimensional-esque cable episode. Instead, we got an episode featuring James Gunn. Like, I dig some of the jokes, but you only really would get if you were within the comic book sphere and get what big of a deal it is to have James Gunn and Zack Snyder riffing off each other. Better James Gunn cameo than the Harley Quinn show. Here he has much more to do and felt much more like him. Missed opportunity to make it David Zaslav though. Didn't even need to cast him, just have Dan Harmon do a dumb voice. Overall meh episode. Alright, final 3 episodes, let's do this. Multiversal Jerry episode. I kinda dug this one. Shows how Jerry would approach the multiverse. The Return on Morty's Son episode after 8 seasons. I kinda dug this one. Better than the season 1 episode actually. They had some nice bonding. Though when revisiting that episode, it was at least easier to buy Morty and Summer being the ages they are, 14 and 17, compared to now where I have to contrive a sci-fi reason for Rick to contrive it. And then the finale of this, oh boy, big old mind F of an episode. I'll state, probably the episode that won me over on Beth. Often seen as like the least favorite behind Rick, Morty, Summer, and Jerry. But you know what, she's a character really about identity and the fractured sense of self. And her mind ends up being a jumble with all the memory people messing with her. I don't know, I just kind of felt for her and hopefully we can see more growth. Anyway, this season was a surprise that I generally liked more of the episodes over disliked. It was like a reversal of the season 5 experience. Overall, that's my experience with Rick and Morty. Whew. You know, I had this weird idea for a Rick versus a weird dark Batman, which would have been like an epic battle of edginess. But didn't feel like following through with it and just made this retrospect. It did end up getting better towards the end, but regardless of its quality, the show's just a part of me that's gone now. It's not really my comfort show anymore, it's just more of a weird show. This used to be a show that aligned with me, and now it's just something else entirely. Maybe I'll keep watching the show, we'll see, not gonna make any promises. Like the randomness of life. I'm really in fun known, aren't I? Anyway, a little season ranking. 9, season 5. When the show broke for me. I don't know if there's really any episode I care fondly about. 8. I'd rank higher for the Pissmaster episode, but the self-cess was abysmal. 7, season 4. I'd like to rank this higher, just kind of middle of the road. 6, season 3. It's got ambition alright, some highs, some lows. 5, season 7. Got some lows, but a boost for 3 good episodes. 4, The Enemy. I just figured I'd put it somewhere. Normally people don't finish, just put this at the bottom. I'll just put it closer to the top as like the line. The Time Girl seemed interesting. 3, season 2. Probably debatably the actual best. I just knock it out for like Beth and Jerry arguing. 2, season 8. Has the lows of later seasons, but gets a boost for genuinely winning the show back. Also, since it's towards the end, it makes me feel like I'm wrapping this up. And 1 is 1, just the quaintness of the first season. Simple as that. It's just season 1. Anyway, cheers y'all.